Hi, I'm Tom Brookshire.
And I'm Pat Summerall. In the past few weeks, we've talked a lot about the top teams and most disappointing teams. But what about the most improved teams in the West, huh?
Mile high. The Denver Broncos are a half a game out. They've won 4, and Alzado on defense, Charlie Johnson, they've got a good ball club out.
I guess Johnson's having one of the best years he's ever had as a pro. He's really throwing the ball well.
He sure has, Pat, and he's had some good ones before.
But I guess if you look over at the NFC, the Western Division is probably the most improved in the league anywhere.
Well, the Rams under Chuck Knox, they like to play again, and they're a very good football team under him, I think.
The record is 7-2, and they're playing good football in all aspects of the game. It's not just John Hadle and Harold Jackson. Atlanta, too, you have to consider vastly improved.
Even with the Dutchman, they've won 5 in a row, right? The Wildman, but they're very physical, and they're going to be there all the way, I think, too.
The key, I guess, there is Bob Lee starting at quarterback. At least that's what everybody says. And who would have thought New Orleans would have won 4 games by now?
I'll tell you, North might be the coach of the year. They may be the spoiler of that entire division.
On this week's show, we'll see how those leaders stayed on top. Los Angeles over New Orleans, Atlanta over Philadelphia, Denver over San Diego, and Pittsburgh over Oakland. And what about our featured performer of the week, Tom?
Well, Pat, our featured performer of the week in the West is number 19, Bob Lee, the quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons.
This footage from last week in Philadelphia, Lee is 6'3", 195, and his 5th year from the University of Pacific, a 16th round pick of Minnesota back in 1968.
The Falcons traded, of course, for him. They got Lonnie Warwick, they gave up Bob Berry, and next year's #1 draft choice, and Lee makes it look like a pretty good deal.
Got some career record as a starter. He won 7 out of 9 and with Minnesota. And in Atlanta, he's won 5 straight without a loss. Overall, that's 12 out of 14 starts.
An unusual young quarterback. The coach, Van Brockman, calls the plays, but Bob Lee, they say, is the leader in the huddle.
And last week, of course, he led the Falcons over the Eagles 44-27.
Last season, the Oakland Raiders began and ended their season in Pittsburgh. Both times they lost by 6 points. Both times they came away wondering what hit them. Last week, the Steelers traveled to Oakland, and this time it was the Raiders who had an unusual treat prepared.
Welcome to the genuine grass field of the Oakland Coliseum, where wonders never cease. How often have you seen a punter run from his own end zone, breaking 4 tackles along the way? Ray Guy now has a lifetime pro rushing average of 21 yards, but he was the reliable part of the Oakland kicking game. The AFC's leading passer, Ken Stabler, could play only the first quarter due to a banged-up knee. And suddenly, the AFC's top-rated offensive machine was missing its main cog. As an older quarterback looked on, the responsibility was passed to quarterback number 3, Darryl LaMonica, a younger old quarterback who did manage to stir up some occasional fireworks with his once renowned arm. Late in the 4th quarter, LaMonica put up Oakland's only touchdown with an old-fashioned bomb to Fred Biletnikoff. The old-fashioned Raider glory was short-lived, however, as for most of the afternoon, LaMonica was entertaining visitors in the Oakland backfield. Number 68, L.C. Greenwood, was one of the most persistent. He even stole poor Darrell's handkerchief. When the left end, Greenwood, was not pestering LaMonica, usually it was the right end who was. Dwight White, number 78. Dwight White was literally all over the field. Watch the right end, number 78. White grabbed 2 of LaMonica's 4 interceptions, one of which, as we can see in a replay, was caused by Joe Green, number 75. LaMonica's Pittsburgh counterpart, number 5, Terry Hanratty, didn't have a great day either. But he capitalized on what the defense gave him enough times to make a lot of people in Oakland miserable indeed. And so 2 former Notre Dame quarterbacks met in the marshland at Oakland. And this time, number 5 was the winner by a score of 17-9.
Well, Pat, feeling they finally had it together, the Houston Oilers were looking to extend their win streak to 2 games last Sunday as the Browns came into town.
The week before, the Browns had been beaten by the undefeated Minnesota Vikings, and facing the Oilers, they found that you can't let down against any team in the league, even if they are the cellar dwellers.
Amid the color and spectacle of the Astrodome, it appeared early as if the Oilers were ready to lay down for the Cleveland Browns. Mike Phipps to Leroy Kelly on the screen rolled for 23 yards, and the Browns were on the prowl. 5 plays later, a short Phipps score gave Cleveland a 10-0 lead with more to come. The 53-yard dash by Greg Pruitt put the Browns in a commanding position at half and found them threatening a rout as the 3rd period began. Pruitt's 75-yard punt return was nullified on a penalty, giving Houston their first break of the game. But the Oilers couldn't cash in as Phipps moved the Browns to 3 field goals and a 23-6 fourth quarter advantage. After allowing 195 yards in the first quarter, the Oilers rose to hold the Browns to a mere 18 yards in the second quarter and 15 yards in the third. Houston dropped Phipps once as giant John Matusak and Guy Roberts combined to halt the Cleveland Star. Cleveland held the Oiler offense in check until late as Lynn Dickey finally got the Oilers moving. Dickey slipped tight end Mac Alston past safety Walt Sumner for Houston's only touchdown in a losing cause 23-13. The Browns go to 5-3-1 on the year, while Houston fails to extend their win streak past 1.
In recent weeks, the Cincinnati Bengals have faced consecutively the Browns, Steelers, Chiefs, Steelers, and Cowboys. Last week, they faced the Buffalo Bills, and if the schedule maker thought he was awarding Cincinnati a well-deserved breather, he was mistaken because things have changed in Buffalo.
For O.J. Simpson's team, excitement used to be entering the second quarter before shuffling off its mortal coil and playing dead. But Lou Saban has changed all that. Now there's a combative young offensive line in Buffalo, and O.J. Simpson fans have something to cheer about and more. There's a new miracle ingredient called defense. Top draft picks like number 85 Walt Potulski are beginning to earn respect. And as the Cincinnati Bengals learned very quickly, these are no longer the Buffaloed Bills. But Lou Saban's reclamation program has been trouble at quarterback, where neither Dennis Shaw nor the rookie Joe Ferguson have been able to balance the Buffalo attack. When number 12, the strong-armed but callow Joe Ferguson took the firing line, the Bengals' Neil Craig intercepted this pass, helping Cincinnati to a 6-3 first quarter advantage on 2 Horst Muhlmann field goals. In the second quarter, Cincinnati's young quarterback Ken Anderson bombed 44 yards to Isaac Curtis, setting up a 1-yard plunge by Boobie Clark to make the score 13-3. But from then on, the Insurgent Bills defense made things tough on Anderson. 2 interceptions by number 28, Dwight Harrison, kept the game close. This one set up a 32-yard touchdown run by O.J. Simpson. Simpson's gallop evened the score at 13-all in the third quarter, but for the remainder of the game, a fired-up Bengals defense held O.J. in check. The Bills did not earn a first down in the last quarter, and only once did they manage to cross their own 25-yard line. Still, Cincinnati could not capitalize against the Bills' defense, but they had the advantage of field position. And with 3 seconds showing, Horace Muleman booted through the concluder. A 33-yard field goal to beat the unbuffaloed Bills 16-13.
The San Diego Chargers had a new coach when they arrived in Denver last Sunday, Tom. Harlan Savari had stepped down, and a young man named Ron Waller took over as the interim coach.
Used to be a good Ram halfback, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
And as former coach of the San Diego special teams, he seems to have the appropriate background for the Chargers, because if any team is a special team, they're it.
The Denver Broncos have tremendous team spirit. It all stems from their mutual admiration and purpose, which can easily be seen in the amount of hand-slapping, fist-knocking, and general jiving they engage in. Why, they've even started holding hands in the defensive huddle. Last Sunday, the Chargers were in Denver, bent more on confusing the Broncos than confronting them. But the chicanery backfired in the form of a little bitty fella named Calvin Jones, who might be 5'7". Floyd Little followed number 68, Laren Jackson, around end for the 13-yard score with only 28 seconds elapsed. Things were really rolling when Billy Van Heusen's run from punt formation picked up 32 yards. But what was a heyday turned to havoc when Denver place kicker Jim Turner pulled a Garo Yepremian. Coy Bacon, a 6'4", 278-pounder, was the recipient, and he lugged it 80 yards for the score. On the next series, it was more salt on the wound as Charlie Johnson fumbled and San Diego recovered. 4 plays later, a roly-poly Robert Holmes put San Diego in front 16-10. And from the looks of things, over on the Denver sideline, Coach John Ralston was working on his 6th mile. But with the help of a safety blitz, the San Diego surge was laid to rest. Right away, the Broncos started to grind out a sustained drive, mostly on the heels of Floyd Little. Charlie Johnson polished off the 62-yard march with a zinger to Gene Washington for the tie. Next, Johnson countered with a short seam splitter to Joe Dawkins, who rolled on down to the Charger 14. From there, the man whose knees may be worse than Joe Willie's threw a 6-pointer to Riley Odoms for the go-ahead score. One series later, the Broncos were back with Floyd Little punching out 10 yards of goal line grit. When Floyd finished the drive, he had 107 yards rushing and the AFC's scoring lead with 11 touchdowns. And Coach John Ralston had himself a 30-19 victory, while Ron Waller had another one of those rude welcomes as a head coach in the NFL.
The New York Jets and the New England Patriots put their identical 2-6 records on the line last Sunday with nothing at stake but their pride.
The Patriots tread lightly when they enter Shea Stadium, and rightly so. They haven't won a game there since 1965. Jim Plunkett did manage to shake loose long enough to hit number 86, Bob Windsor, for an early score. But with only one other point producer late in the fourth quarter, the stigma of the stadium was proving too much for the Pats to handle. It was a frustrating day in general for Jimmy Plunkett, especially with his receivers trying the new hear the ball in technique. With his primary receivers covered and his secondary receivers likewise, Plunkett was continually forced to bite the dust. 6 times Plunkett was sacked, and by the end of the afternoon he would have only one consolation: it couldn't get any worse. For the Jets, however, it was a different story. Allowing New England a grudging 41 yards rushing, they played an alert, gang-tackling defense that made its own breaks. Chris Farasopoulos' goalward romp was interrupted, but the Jets were quickly back in stride on the power blasts of John Riggins, who scored once and rushed for 96 yards. Emerson Boozer added 6 to the tally himself, plus a healthy 79 yards on the ground. Meanwhile, the walls of Jim Plunkett's protective pocket were as porous as ever, and panic had obviously set in. On this one of 3 Plunkett miscues, number 21, Steve Cannon, was the interceptor, and he returned it 30 yards. Rookie Bill Demery executed well at quarterback for the Jets and showed a good touch on this late score to Jerome Barkham. At the gun, the Jets had themselves a 33-13 victory, a 3-6 record, and hopes of taking the wraps off their offense against the Bengals this Sunday.
Well, Pat, once again it appears the Miami Dolphins are reaching their Super Bowl form of a year ago.
Right again, Tom, and last week in the Orange Bowl, the Dolphins were looking for their 17th straight regular season victory at home against the once powerful Baltimore Colts.
While he's not one of those flashy young running backs who can turn a precise, hard-hitting defense into a mangled bit of twisted steel, his ability to carry the ball while eluding defenders could certainly have helped the Baltimore Colts on this Sunday. The Dolphins have super-quick Mercury Morris as their quick threat for 6, and while not the best at bubble blowing, he ranks as one of the best in the business in scoring from anywhere on the field. Mercury's touchdown covered 53 yards, one of two that the elusive 5-year veteran from West Texas State was to wind through the confused Baltimore secondary for the afternoon. The Dolphin Flash loaded for 144 yards on 12 carries for the afternoon, including this 48-yard touchdown. Three field goals and a 34-yard jaunt by Charlie Lee rounded out the Dolphin offensive barrage. Even when the Baltimore Colts got a break, they just couldn't hang on. Rex Kern's fumble cost the Colts field position, something which Baltimore never gained all day long, as Miami's no-name defense held the sputtering Blue offense to a mere 132 yards in total offense. Even when the Colts tried to punt it back, Dolphin pressure was just too great. Number 25, Tim Foley, blocked the kick and stayed in the right place at the right time, as the unpredictable bouncing football eluded one Dolphin and two Colts before finding Foley once again. Baltimore punter Dave Lee fell victim to the same occurrence later on, as number 53 Bob Matheson blocked the punt, allowing Tim Foley to again score the touchdown. The Dolphin defense allowed the Colts only 3 first downs during the game, while silencing rookie Burt Jones and the Baltimore Colts 44-0.
We'll be right back with the second half of This Week in Pro Football following station identification.
Well, Pat, it's hard to believe that any team could be in second place in the NFC Central with only 3 wins this late in the season.
Well, I hate to say this, but it's really not that hard to believe, Tom, when you consider that the Packers, who are that second-place team, have suffered injuries and quarterback problems all year long and continue to have more of the same in last week's game against the St. Louis Cardinals.
Pre-game entertainment budgets have been cut to the bone in Green Bay, or perhaps it was just their Thanksgiving came early presentation. And then the St. Louis Cardinals were presented with John Brockington, all 230 bruising pounds of him. Lately, teams have keyed on Brockington because they know that the Packer quarterbacks are not throwing well. But last week, John had himself so keyed up that he gouged out 137 yards rushing and gave the Pack the early lead. The hungry Packers blocked this St. Louis punt, and their margin jumped to 10-0. Then Donnie Anderson, number 44, celebrated his return to Green Bay with a catch and run that brought the Redbirds back part of the way at 10-7. Green Bay continued to build on its lead as number 25 Les Goodman filled in with power and crunch for the sidelined MacArthur Lane. Quarterback Jerry Taggy in his first start added a touchdown to 4 Chester Marco field goals, and Green Bay was in no mood to be headed. The Cardinals tried to blitz back as Jim Hart began honing in on wide receiver Ahmad Rashad. This 23-yard scoring play, combined with a Terry Metcalf 2-yarder, closed the Cardinals to within 4 at 25-21. But victories have been all too few and precious for the Packers this year, and they weren't about to let this one go as their defense slammed the door and locked up win number 3 in 9 games for Green Bay this year.
Last week, the Minnesota Vikings continued their dominance over the Detroit Lions, a team they must love to see coming down the road.
Pat, I can't agree with you 100% there. The Vikes do dominate the Lions, but the way those two teams knock each other around, I'm sure neither group likes to see the other coming into town.
The Minnesota Vikings are riding the highest of all in the NFL, and last week, with an 8-0 record and prospects of winning their 12th straight over the Lions, no one could deny that they're number 1 right now. Only the Lions took exception to the signs of the times and blew in marauder style to ransack Fran Tarkenton. The Detroit offense was equally belligerent as Bill Munson teamed with Charlie Sanders for good yardage and a jolting climax. The upset-minded Lions jumped to an early lead on a Bill Munson to Ron Jesse hookup, good for 33 yards and the touchdown. But hell hath no fury like the Vikings stung, and so they came as all expected, crunching and clawing and dishing out Monday's welts and bruises. They took a 14-7 lead on a typical Viking scavenger hunt, a play that looks lucky, but with the Purple Gang is just a matter of course. The repeat shows that 10 Vikings charged punter Herman Weaver, and of course they got what they deserved. And then from out of the Nordic mist came a memory. Number 30, Bill Brown, on a running and receiving rampage that took the pride out of the Lions and had the fans checking to see if someone had set their watches back 5 years. Brown's 101 yards rushing and his courageous overall play gave Minnesota all the heart they needed as the Viking career rushing leader set up a 21-7 lead, which his team took when Ed Marinaro barged straight up the middle for 6. With the contest securely in hand, Fran Tarkenton unlimbered his arm and went winging to his favorite receiver, number 42, John Gilliam. And watching that ball fly, one had to wonder who is going to stop the Vikings. Certainly not the Lions, who after losing to the Purple Peril 28-7 are in no position to dispute the veracity of the signs of the times.
The New York Giants made wholesale personnel changes against the Dallas Cowboys last week, but it mattered little as the faltering Giants fell to their 7th consecutive defeat.
It was a festive afternoon for football at the Yale Bowl, and the much-maligned New York Giants defense made Roger Staubach the feast for their homecoming. It was also homecoming for former Yalie Calvin Hill, and although he did not tear up the old sod, Calvin rushed for nearly 100 tough yards. For the second straight Sunday, the Doomsday defense was simply devastating. Quarterback Randy Johnson's main tormentor was cornerback Charlie Waters, number 41, who intercepted 2 passes. The Cowboys burst to a 13-0 lead on 2 field goals and a 6-pointer by Walt Garrison, who snatched a touchdown from his shoe tops. New York rallied on Johnson's long-distance bombing and some nifty receiving by Bob Grimm, who looked the ball into his sure hands. A field goal and Ron Johnson's short pop narrowed the score to 13-10 at halftime. In the final 2 quarters, Giant victory drives often fell fingertips away from touchdowns. But be it a bomb or a bit of trickery, no Giant ruse could stay the Dallas diehards. And the Cowboys emerged victors 23-10. For the Giants, the loss was their swan song in this long and disappointing season.
Well, Pat, while Dallas seems set with Roger Staubach at quarterback, both Washington and San Francisco have problems at that rather important position.
Never more evident than last Sunday, Tom, when the 49ers started their 3rd different quarterback in 3 weeks.
Amidst autumn splendor in the nation's capital, the 49ers played Russian roulette at quarterback. Dick Nolan was unsatisfied with number 11 Steve Spurrier, while veteran mainstay John Brody, number 12, played out the string until retirement. So into the breach treaded untested Joe Reed, who was stepped on by the Washington defense. Seven times the lusty hitting Redskins bored into Reed's pocket and buried him. On Washington's first offensive series, the lean and mean 49ers forced starting quarterback Billy Kilmer out of the game. Wobbly-legged Sonny Jurgensen stood in for Billy for just 1 play and threw a touchdown to set back Larry Brown. Out came Sonny and in came Billy, and his burgundy shirt stood out like a red cape in a bull ring. Larry Brown was battered and bone-weary, so into the grinder came Dwayne Thomas, the forgotten man. Dwayne was bench rusty, and the old liquid stride of yore had congealed into molasses. Even the usually reliable Charlie Taylor was betrayed by brittle fingers on his patented quick post move. While the gears on offense refused to mesh, the well-oiled over-the-hill gang smoothly worked over young Joe Reed. The Redskins ruined Reed's debut and broke the spirit of his gifted receivers, too. Number 37 Pat Fisher blasted Gene Washington. Number 55, Chris Hanberger, blitzed into Ken Willard, and the ball bounced nicely into the hands of alert Brig Owens, number 23. Owens' touchdown run was called back, but it mattered little, as 5 turnovers turned the tide in Washington's favor. For 9 long weeks, the proud Washington defense has stood resolute while their offense has wilted. Their startling contribution has kept Super Bowl visions dancing in George Allen's head. Billy Kilmer revived the sagging fortunes of his offense with a lob to Charlie Haraway, who ran it in for 6. Defense plus 4 Curtinite field goals and 3 touchdown passes, the last going to Mike Hancock, combined to beat the floundering 49ers 33-9.
Last week, the Los Angeles Rams stopped a 2-game losing skid that had some people wondering if they weren't about to become goats.
A few weeks ago, this matchup would have been a laugher, but the Saints are now a handful, as John Hadle found out right away when number 57 Jim Merlo stole an early pass. Then Archie Manning gave Rams fans a start as he hit a streaking Jubilee Dunbar for 65 yards and a 7-0 New Orleans lead. And who could celebrate a scoring Jubilee better? But then came the reckoning, and the Saints were almost de-haloed. With their defense peaked to perfection, the Rams smoked in and scattered Archie's trick-trying offense all over the field. It took a little longer for the Rams offense to get going, though, what with one obstacle or another standing in their way. But John Hadle to number 84 Jack Snow finally got Los Angeles trucking. Snow has been used sparingly this year, but on only 3 receptions he came up with 60 of Hadle's 221 passing yards last week. Tony Baker powered in for 1 score, and the Rams were off to their first win in 3 games. Hadle to multi-purpose back Jim Bertelson moved Los Angeles into position for another score. And Bertelson ran it in himself to put Los Angeles out of reach. Number 30, Lawrence McCutcheon, took up where Bertelson left off as he raced for 115 yards and was the touchstone on an 18-yard scoring pass from Hadle that gave Los Angeles a 29-7 victory. The big win kept the Rams 1 game ahead of the hard-charging Falcons in the NFC West.
So the Rams are still on top, Tom, but I wouldn't be surprised if they can't hear some footsteps thundering up behind.
Yeah, that's for sure. My old teammate, the Dutchman, really has the Atlanta Falcons thundering. Last week, his young quarterback, Bob Lee, led the Falcons into Philadelphia in search of a team record 5th straight victory.
Field General Robert M. Lee has started 14 pro games and won 12 of them. But now with Norm Van Brocklin's Falcons, he's getting his first real shot. And so far, with him at the helm, the Falcons have yet to lose. But last week in Philadelphia, the Eagles were going to make sure that Atlanta was not looking ahead to Minnesota. While the Falcons possess one of the NFL's hottest quarterbacks in Bob Lee, the Eagles can counter with a hot property of their own, number 5, Roman Gabriel, who has passed for more yardage than anybody else in pro football so far this season. One of Gabriel's favorite targets has been running back Tom Sullivan, number 25. When halfback Sullivan doesn't have the ball, he blocks. And this opens the way for fullback Norm Bulash, number 36. As much as Gabriel likes to throw to his backs, his favorite receiver this year has been 6 foot 8 inch flanker Harold Carmichael, number 17. To cover a receiver of Carmichael's size, speed, and strength has to be the year's most unenviable task for any defensive secondary. If Roman Gabriel gets sufficient time from his inexperienced line, blocking out such formidable adversaries as number 74, Mike Tilleman, there is hardly any way to stop a well-thrown high pass to the NFL's leading receiver, Harold Hoagie Carmichael, number 17. Last week, Gabriel completed 21 of 33 with 3 touchdown passes against the league's top-rated pass defense. Unfortunately for the Eagles, they couldn't score every time they had the ball, and when they did have to give it up, the Falcons were ready. Twice good punt run backs were turned in by safety man Ray Brown, number 34. In the early going, the Falcons got themselves into some trouble. As the game progressed, things changed, and the ball started bouncing for the Falcons instead of against them. With Bob Lee directing a diversified attack, the Falcons rolled up more than 40 points for the 4th time this season. Ken Burrows scored 2 touchdowns, and for the 5th straight week since Bob Lee took over at quarterback, the Falcons were unbeaten. In the late stages, Van Brocklin put Pat Sullivan, number 7, in at quarterback, and the former Heisman winner threw his first professional touchdown to ice a convincing Atlanta victory over the stubborn Eagles, 44-27.
Well, Pat, I'm going to fire and fall back. We got to make our selections, and you're 31-18, and I'm 23-26.
As they say, it's time for you to make a move.
Incredible.
Well, we got some games this week that, if you're really ready to gamble, you can make a move. San Francisco at Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
That's not, that's not gambling. I like Los Angeles, too. Cleveland at Oakland. Now, this is a little tighter contest, I think.
Yeah, I think the Browns are a good football team, even though they couldn't beat Minnesota. I'm going to go with the Cleveland Browns against the Raiders this time.
This is at Oakland. As we said, they both got the same record, 5-3-1. I sort of like the Raiders.
Even with Stabler pulling the bad wheel, huh?
Well, I think LaMonica's due to get hot. He certainly had some frustrating afternoons recently. So I'll go with the Raiders.
Okay, we're differing there.
Minnesota at Atlanta. What do you think?
I don't think anybody's going to beat the Vikings. I don't see how. I'm going to go with the Minnesota Vikings to win another one.
Well, Bob Lee's playing against his old teammates. I like the Falcons and Norm Van Brocklin. I'll pick them in an upset. At any rate, we'll be back next week to show you what happens. I'm Pat Summerall.
And I'm Tom Brookshire, and we'll see you next week.
Brought to you by West Clocks, a division of General Time, a Tally Industries company. Promotional consideration provided by Best Western Motels. There are over 1,250 Best Western motels located in more than 900 cities throughout the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And by American Airlines. If the sun is shining there, chances are American flies there. From the Caribbean to California to the South Pacific, American Airlines to the good life. Program materials for This Week in Pro Football traveled via REA Air Express.